What is your creepy unexplained childhood experience? Laying in bed one night, it's pitch black apart from the light creeping under the door from the landing. My mum was actually with me in the same room as we had only just moved in and she was sleeping on the floor. I look up and the door slowly creaks open, and slowly, an oldish woman peers around the door, looks at me and goes away. I just thought I was in a nightmare and turned around real fast and went under the covers, hoping I would wake up. Then I will never forget my mum whispering to me, "Did you just see someone peer around the door?" Safe to say we didn't sleep a wink that night. Probably not going to be seen, but that's okay. This is about 4.5 years ago and I was 19 at the time. I'm driving back from the gym one night at around 1 a.m., decently foggy. I pass by a crosswalk for our local trail called Iron Horse Trail, that has sensors that light up if someone is going to cross. They go off right as I pass it. I look back in my rear view and there's a person standing right there in the middle of the crosswalk. He's not even 10 feet behind the car, and it would have been impossible for him to be there with my having just driven through. I effing punch it. I get to a stop sign about 100 yards away. I take a deep breath and look behind again. The same person is now under a sidewalk stoplight not even 15 feet behind me. I floor it again. I'm freaked out. I drive. I just drive. I run a stop sign and keep going. I'm way past the turn for my house and I'm at least 5 turns off. I just stop at the next stop sign to backtrack and turn right. I effing lose my breath because mid-turn I see him in the middle of an unlit street with his back turned to me. I just feel thousands of shivers go down my spine and hold the gas down. I blow right past him, or what I thought was him. I keep going down this long stretch and I look back. He's just standing there. I stop. I watch this outline just stand there and suddenly, I blink and he's gone. I don't even have a second and I feel something land on my roof with a metallic clang while the car violently shakes. I gas it. I see a person roll off of my roof and off my bumper. I just drive and drive for half an hour, and hurry home when I calm down. I finally fall asleep in my bed. I was still living with my parents, and wake up the next morning to my mom saying, "Matt, were you racing around last night? I heard your car a few blocks away. Why does the roof look like something fell on it?" I'm groggy but get up thinking it was like a bad dream. I go into the garage with her and look at the roof. It's got marks on it like something landed on it. Light dings and small dents like hail. I look at my rear window and see a very clear hand print on it, and a boot scuff on my rear bumper with finger marks trailing by the bottom of it on the accumulated dust. I lost any and all words I had. I didn't tell a effing soul. I still get shivers thinking about it and couldn't drive that way for a week. My sister and I were having a prank war for like a week straight. Well, we agreed to a ceasefire since my birthday was in 2 days. I just turned 11 and later that night I hear my closet door open. Oh, so my sister wants to prank me on my special day, eh? I'll show her, I thought. So I know she snuck in and forgot my door squeaks. So I had an idea, I would get up and push her. Ha ha ha, I'm a genius kiddo. So I slowly get up and she steps out of the closet. Wasn't my sister, because my sister doesn't have long black hair and scars on her face and isn't as tall as a grown woman. I wanted to scream, but instead I just froze and silently started whimpering and crying. She puts her finger up to her lips and lets out a shush, and opens my window and crawls out, slowly closed my window never to be seen again. At first I thought it was a ghost. Now I'm convinced it was a crackhead or something. When I was a kid, I remember waking up in this room with my mom holding me down and this older Somali lady, and I remember that I was screaming and crying the whole time, and I remember peeing blood the days after that memory and being in pain. But that's all I remember. My mom said that it never happened, but I know something did. I lived in Kenya and my mom was always gung-ho about FGM, but my dad refused to go along with it. Also, the fact that I have little to no memories of my life before the age of 14. Took me a bit to figure out FGM meant female genital mutilation. People who do that are sick Fs and should be treated like the human waste they are. When I was very young I had very vivid memories and nightmares of what I now know to be the Vietnam War. They stopped by the time I was 8. Those who believe in reincarnation seem to think that children can remember past lives up to a certain age. I heard of one kid who had detailed memories of a house he had lived in and how he had died, Eventually his dad found the house and turns out the couple who lived there had had a son die just like the little boy had said. Weird stuff. And no, I'm not saying I believe in reincarnation. When I was a kid, my dad would take us to a giant lake with a big sandy shore, like a landlocked beach for hillbillies. I was wading in the shallow end when I felt something brush through my fingers. Being 7 and wishing it was a real beach, I thought, maybe these are sea plants. Then realized that was stupid. As I squeezed the tendrils that were brushing my hand, they squished and sunk, and I felt bones through the soft squishy mass. Finger bones like I was holding the hand of a child my age. I got out of the water, sat on the shore, and told no one. Year later my sister said she thought a boy had been kicking her under the water, but when she grabbed at the foot it felt cold and squishy, and she also told no one. Back in the 90s, before we even had a computer to use the internet, my sister and I had a Super Nintendo and a bunch of friends came over at night to play Donkey Kong. One of our friends knew the secret code you input on the start menu to get 99 lives. Our friend gloated over us that he wouldn't tell us the code. The next morning, my sister wakes up and is so excited. I remember this because I was awake already. She immediately turns on the game and enters the code, and voila, the code works. She said she had a dream where Donkey Kong told her the code. Not so much creepy as it is kinda awesome. When I was around 8 or 9, my family and my parents' friends, along with their kids, had a picnic at a park. My friend John and I were running around as kids do, playing tag. He was older, around 11 at the time. At one point we got separated. I was clearly lost in the park and I couldn't find my friend, much less my parents. That's when a woman approached me. She was rather tall, had long curly black hair, was fair-skinned, and wore thick-rimmed glasses. She must have been in her mid-30s. She looked very much like any number of my parents' friends. Initially, this woman simply asked me if I was lost. I nodded sheepishly. She then held out her hand and said that she could take me back to my mom. I told her, "It's okay, my friend John will find me." She then asked, "Don't you remember me? I'm a friend of your mother's. Come. I'll take you to her." Again, I repeated that. "It's okay, I know my friend John will come find me." That's when she said creepiest words a stranger had ever told me. "Did you know that you have the most beautiful eyes?" Even to an 8 or 9-year-old, I knew this wasn't normal behavior. Sure, I was a really cute kid with big brown eyes and jet black hair, but I knew that's simply not something a stranger who literally approached me a few minutes prior should be saying. Just as she reached out her hand and told me that we could go find my mom together, my friend John suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He looked winded. "Where did you go?" he asked. She looked a little flustered. "Who's this?" he asked. Kids that age are pretty straight to the point. "I'm a friend of his mother's," she replied, smiling. "Come, let's go find her," she repeated. "Sorry, we're playing tag." "Gotta go," said John. He yanked me by the wrist and we ran off together. Flash forward to a month or so later. I'm going to mall with my mom one afternoon. As we're walking, I suddenly noticed the same woman from the park walking towards us. The same long curly black hair, fair skin, and thick-rimmed glasses. My mother would always stop and talk if she noticed a friend passing by, and yet, this same woman who's clearly walking towards us, who's obviously within my mom's eyesight, this same woman who kept insisting that she was a friend of my mother's and that we should go find her, why it seems like she's a complete stranger to my mother. And as this woman kept approaching and walking towards us, I remember everything in slow motion. She noticed me noticing her, she recognized the fact that I instantly recognized her, and at the very precise moment when we walked right past each other, I looked up, and she looked down at me with the most devilish smile on her face. That's actually a pretty common abduction tool. When I was little, my parents and I had a password that they would tell their friends if ever something happened, and they had to get someone I didn't know to pick me up from school or a friend's house or something. I have this bizarre memory from my childhood. I was 4 when this happened, about 1989. I remember being locked in an empty bedroom in this house. No bed, no curtains, no nothing. And I know I was there for a long time, over 2 days. I recall peeing in the empty closet, and I remember being scared when it got dark and the room being partially illuminated by the orange light of a street lamp, Street lamp light still creeps me out. I had a box of crayons but no coloring book. I ended up melting the crayons on the radiator that ran beneath the window. The smell of melted crayon and pee is a detail that I'll never forget. I remember that I was too short to look out the window, even standing on the radiator. I spent all my life in foster homes until I was 14, so it's hard to remember where I was supposed to be. Some other details that are less clear. There was a black woman in a beige trench coat and maybe she left me there. I'm white, if that makes any difference. Though I don't recall who came and got me. I have the vaguest recollection of sitting with a woman in some kind of lounge that had a small deli. It may have been the lobby of a large auditorium. I was eating a tuna fish sandwich. I remember we were waiting for something. I recall fiddling with a metal box on the wall, the kind with those pull-tab games that bars have. There was a cab at one point. And that's all I remember. One last thing, and this one is, to me, the weirdest. I was living in Tacoma, Washington, USA, in 2002 and I used to take walks down to the waterfront daily. On those walks I always passed a house that gave me intense creepy vibes, and I am 87.5% certain that this was the house I was locked in. I am not psychic or even that intuitive, so I think that I remembered it. My theory is that the black woman was at one point my caseworker and she just left me in this empty house so she didn't have to fuss with me. In any event, it left a faint but eerie scar that will always be there. At least until I get old and forget everything. My best friend once told me that it sounds like I was part of a state-sponsored experiment that focused on isolation or something like that. I don't believe that at all. But it sounds creepy. Anyway. That's my story. It's not even that interesting, but it creeps me out, so I thought I'd share. When I was in preschool, my parents put my brother and me in a posh school. We live in South America where the majority of the population is brown, but in that school, since it was for rich kids, it was mostly white kids. I'm quite brown, my brother is white. I got bullied a lot there by my classmates. The only kid who didn't bully me at all was this Christian boy named Christian. He was really blonde with curly hair and pink cheeks, he looked like a cherub. Somehow, he got bullied too, I think because of his accent. His parents were American or something, not locals for sure. Anyway, one day at recess we were playing and this big bully from our class came to pick on us. Christian was up in the slide and the bully somehow pushed him to the floor and started pinching him while Christian asked him to stop. I remember very clearly the bully was pinching Christian's shoulder. After recess we had to go to a dance rehearsal and Christian spent the entire time complaining about how much his shoulder hurt. Next day he didn't show up, nor did the next weeks. Last time we all saw him was when his dad brought him to the class, telling us he had to go back home, and they were smiling and seemed cheery, but guess what? Christian was missing an arm. He had nothing below the shoulder, the same shoulder the bully had pinched. His dad explained to us, smiling like a catalog model the entire time, that Christian had had an accident and had to get his arm amputated. I turned around to see the bully's reaction and he seemed as shocked as anybody else. It really messed up with me and I became very afraid of bullies and didn't let anyone touch my shoulders until a few years ago. I know it's irrational to think a simple pinching from a 5-year-old can do so much damage, but this couldn't be a coincidence. Late to the party so no one will probably see this, but whatever, here's my part. So when I was little in my first house, it was a normal day, nothing too unusual happening. However, when it got to night time, my dad decided that he wanted to sleep in my bed with me. Now this was strange as he had his own bed and had never even thought about sleeping with me. So he does, and eventually in the night, I am on the outside of the bed and he's on the inside. I feel something grab me and I land on the floor, and I open my eyes and under the bed there are two glowing red eyes staring back at me. My dad immediately grabs me and lifts me up and puts me on the inside and not another word is said. I'll never forget that night though, and thinking about if something would have happened had he not slept with me. I had an out-of-body experience during one of the many episodes where my mother attacked me when I was really young. When I got flashbacks to these attacks, there was one in particular for which I had a very clear, very accurate out-of-body experience where I saw my 10-year-old self being attacked by her. When I was younger, I used to think I was having dreams of an old woman in a blue dress and cat-eye glasses sitting at the end of my bed singing to me. She'd always sing the same song and then leave. One night I followed her into my brother's room. He is younger than me and was around 5. Instead of singing to him, he woke up and they began talking. After like 20 minutes my mother came in and asked what we were doing. My brother said, "I'm just talking to the lady in the blue dress." She made us go back to bed. I woke up still thinking it was a dream. My mom told me the next morning she didn't want me sneaking out of bed anymore in the middle of the night to play with my brother. I asked her what she was talking about and she gave me her version of what she saw the night before. To this day I believe that was real, and that every night that old woman would sing to me. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. She stopped singing to me soon after that, though people in my family still caught my brother speaking to nothing on numerous occasions. A while later, an aunt came to visit from down south and refused to come into our house after seeing an old woman in cat glasses standing in the upstairs window. She came in, asking who was upstairs, then freaked out when my mother told her no one and let her search the house. When I was 9 years old, I went on a 3-month trip to Laos with my family in 1998. We stayed in a village around Luang Prabang. A lot of people sleep with mosquito nets around the futon floor bed. So that's where my little sister and I slept. One night, I woke up around past midnight. I see a glowing white female figure to my right, outside the mosquito net. Suddenly it went through the net, hovered above me and went out the net the opposite side. I turned to look at my sister who was laying beside me, and her eyes were wide open. She had also saw the white floating figure, and she whispered to me if I saw it too. Also, when I was in Laos, I heard a man screaming throughout the night, a shadow figure staring at me close by my bedside and floating red dots. There was no electricity in the village. When I was around 8 years old my bedroom was down a hallway by itself. I had a window that had been broken, so there was a piece of wood in place of the bottom part. The window was very high up. No one could just reach easily. My mother had been cleaning my room that night and had me go back in there to get her glass of tea she had left in there. When I walked in I glanced at the window, and there was a rigid gray bony witch-looking finger with a long dead-looking nail and bumps along the finger. The finger was an abnormal length and just above the piece of wood motioning me to come toward it. I jumped under my bed terrified and screamed for my mother. I told her I was too scared to come out from under the bed. She was in the living room watching TV and didn't feel like getting up, and did not realize what I was so scared over. I eventually crawled out and darted out of the bedroom as fast as I could. I am 26 years old and that memory is still as vivid as the day it happened. It has always been unsettling that whatever it was trying to get me to come to it. When I was 4 or 5, I'm 28 now, my older 10-year-old brother and I were roughhousing in the basement. I remember this very distinctively because I still can't explain what happened. It was just my brother and I in the house. Mom went to go grocery shopping with my brother babysitting. We were roughhousing in the basement when all of a sudden a closet door just swung open. We both stopped and stared at the closet when a dark black entity floated out of the closet and floated towards us. My older brother took off upstairs and left me by myself, and I remember just staring at this black mass and I had no idea what it is. I blacked out and when I came to, I was crying on the stairwell with my mom asking me what was going on. I was crying saying there is a ghost downstairs and she didn't believe my brother and I till this day. My brother and I swear a dark entity/ghost floated out of that closet. The weird thing is, my brother slept downstairs in one of the rooms, and at night he claims he could hear someone walking around outside his room. One time his friend stayed over and slept on the floor, and his friend claimed there was something staring at him from underneath the bed. A cousin of mine stayed over one night and claimed he saw a black dark mass roam from room to room in the basement. He got up to check it out and found nothing in the rooms, so he sat down in the rumpus room, where my brother and I were roughhousing, when he claimed he saw a dark mass staring at him at the end of the hallway. He ran upstairs. We all sat down and talked about these experiences and came to the conclusion that someone was possibly murdered because the house had a really big crawl space. The crawl space entrance was located in the closet that the entity came from. No idea how to explain it, so we decided on someone being murdered.